Haven't you had enough of me yet?
No! Impossible. It's impossible.
That's what you think.
Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack, bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the stockbroker clerked, Lady Frances Carfax disappeared, and Bruce Partington planned, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever wondered what a commissionaire does? Or what a compositor is? Or of the difference between a stevedore and a stoker?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 476, Revenge. Well, hello there, and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the details in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And you haven't heard the last of me, Burt Wolder. Yes.
I'm hearing you less frequently now that you stopped the echo.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Well, we have an exciting episode ahead for you today. It's all about revenge. Where was revenge promised in the Sherlock Holmes stories? Where was it carried out? Who are the victims and who were the perpetrators, or at least the loudmouths who claimed they would be taking revenge or seeking revenge? That's what we're going to be talking about. And keep your ears open, attuned to the Distant View Revenge. And if we've missed something that's completely obvious to you, and that maybe we haven't swept up in our summary here, then let us know. You can always reach us on email at trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. And that's the email address you should use, trifles@ihearofsherlock.com, if you have a suggestion for a particular episode you might wish us to undertake. We do hear from listeners from time to time, and if we happen to use one of your topics as a topic for one of our episodes, then we will send you a thank you gift in the mail. So this one in particular comes from our friend Christian in Germany, who was asking about the Norwood Builder and wondering about fictional revenge or returns of villains in the canon. So, Christian, thank you for this suggestion, and we will get underway momentarily. Also, we would just remind folks, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com. Either one of those will give you access to listen to the show ad-free and to bonus content that we put out from time to time. And it's as little as $1 or less a month. If you decide to prop us up annually, you get a discount. So check that out and see what works for you. We do appreciate your support. Okay, well, here we are, avenging angels of sorts. Bert,
Yeah.
maybe that's a great place to start, at the very beginning of the canon, with the topic of revenge.
Well, one of the great characters who actually executed his plans was Jefferson Hope from A Study in Scarlet. What happens there is that his fiancée, Lucy Ferrier, and her father, John, are persecuted by the Mormons, and that's Enoch Drebber and Stangerson. And, what happens is Lucy does not come through that, her father is murdered and she's forced into marriage. And Jefferson Hope hunts the two men across continents for 20 years and corners them in London and forces Drebber to choose between pill A or pill B. And so he really is the archetype. He's the noble avenger. He doesn't view himself really as a murderer, but more as an executioner of justice. And, Holmes seems to have great sympathy for his backstory.
Yeah, he really does. It seems like, well, it's one of those bittersweet stories. I mean, you could tell it was a true romance between Jefferson Hope and Lucy Ferrier. Is it Ferrier or Ferrier?
Oh, I think
like the dog or like the sparkling water.
I think it's like the dog. I think it's like the American pronunciation of the Ferriers.
Ferrier.
Drill ye farriers, drill. No, actually, that's farriers. But
Furrier?
Well, you could be, but no one wants mink anymore. A furrier and a worrier.
A furrier and a farrier went into a bar. No. So it was
wait a minute now. If I have to cross the river, I'll need a farrier.
A farrier,
but not that kind of farrier.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay. Well, it's just a trifle. Goodbye.
Yeah. Goodbye. No, wonderful romance between these two that was interrupted after Hope had to take some time away in the forest and the wild lands there, and he comes back and finds Lucy married off, and clearly she was miserable, and these brutes of Mormon extraction took her into that relationship against her will. And so it was just a tragic kind of thing, and of course in the end Hope ends up dying in his jail cell as well, but it seemed, I think Watson tells us he had a smile on his face in the end, as if he knew he had accomplished what he set out to do. So, revenge promised and enacted. So, that is the first example. Of course, we have another great example in the very next story, in The Sign of Four. Jonathan Small, right? He hunts down Miss Moran. Well, he doesn't hunt her down, but he takes care of her because he knows that her father was kind of the more honorable among the two British officers who swindled them out of the treasure of Agra.
Yeah,
and he searches
Mary
out
Morstan.
the Sholtos, right?
Right, that's Mary Morstan. You said
Did I say Moran? Yeah. Sorry, Mary Morstan. That'll be interesting if Watson married Colonel Moran's daughter. Well, that's a whole other thing.
Yes.
But yeah, Captain Morstan was the more honorable among them. So Small was enacting revenge on behalf of the other three who made up the Sign of Four, who were taken down because of Sholto in particular.
See, now this is an interesting topic because one of the things that really goes hand in glove with revenge is motive. And in both of these cases, and I think in the rest of them, there's a very clear motive. With Jonathan Small, it's theft and betrayal. He and his three Sikh conspirators have a claim to the Agra treasure. Of course, they stole it, but they were betrayed by Major Sholto. So that's, the motive. And in Study in Scarlet, you've got the death of Lucy, his fiancée by Jefferson Hope, and that's a very clear motive. And in the rest of them, it's the motives that are really very strong and that mobilize these people to commit these acts.
Yeah, I mean, some of them we'll see are complete villains in their revenge. They were actually they did not care to be held accountable in some cases. So that was their method of, or their motive behind revenge. But let's talk a little bit more about some of these more noble cases of vengeance.
Oh, noble cases of vengeance.
Now, how about your friend Dr. Leon Sterndale?
Well, yeah, it's hard to think about Leon being noble, but, the motive is very clear. It's the murder of his beloved. What's happened there, of course, is that Mortimer Tregennis has killed his own sister, whom Sterndale loved, using the devil's foot root poison to get a family inheritance. And Sterndale tumbles to this and realizes that he can't prove Mortimer's guilt, so he forces Mortimer to endure that same terrifying death, by exposing him to the same poison. And that's really, vigilante justice. And that's the case where Holmes famously says, "I've never loved Watson, but if I did, and if the woman I loved had met such an end, I might act even as our lawless lion hunter has acted." I think that's what he says.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, not a complete angel there, but you could certainly understand his motivation. Again, out of love. His sweetheart being ripped away from him. Another one in that regard is in Wisteria Lodge. We know that the Tiger of San Pedro is the individual that we are concerned with. And what Holmes ends up uncovering is a multinational chase, an international chase that began in South America and ended in England as victims of the Tiger of San Pedro, who was, I'm trying to think what his name was, Don
Murillo?
Don Murillo, that's right. Because he was just a vicious dictator in a South American country. And of course, we know that he had killed Senor Durando. And Senora Durando was passing as Don Murillo's kid's governess. So she was a spy for the organization, and obviously they wanted to bring this tyrant to justice, but she also had a very personal motivation for seeing his reign of terror end, and that was, of course, the murder of her husband by Don Murillo.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a very good case. And, there's another case that's very clearly underscored with revenge, and that's the Three Gables, which has our, character here whom we never meet, Douglas. Wasn't it Douglas Maberly?
Douglas Maberly, yeah.
And he, he was in Rome, I think. He was an attaché in Rome. He's died. And he became moody and brokenhearted, all because of his awful relationship with, this terrible, terrible character. And he writes a book, all about her actions and so on, as an act of revenge. And then, of course, it's all of his belongings and his mother's household property that's really the focal point here as, the gang tries to recover this manuscript at any cost. But his actions there are revenge, and because of the way he was treated and to make clear, the heinous acts of this woman.
Yeah, Isadora Klein. And it was really, again, all the ones we've talked about so far, well, with the exception of the Sign of Four, sorry. But the rest that we've talked about so far have all been related to some sort of romance, some sort of love. And it's either a love ripped away, or in the case of the Three Gables, a romance gone wrong. You know, someone who felt he was mistreated by his paramour. And he wanted to have the last word. And there Isadora Klein was trying to prevent that from coming out. So one more in when we're talking about love triangles. And this is probably one of the more tragic ones out there, and that is in The Crooked Man. We have good old Henry Wood, Corporal Henry Wood, who gets sent into an ambush by Colonel Barclay because Barclay and Wood were in competition for the love of Nancy Devoy. And as you know, Nancy eventually became Nancy Barclay, because Wood was sent, into that ambush. Barclay thought he was surely killed, but he managed to stay alive and work his way back to England over 30 years. And he showed up at the Barclay residence after recognizing Nancy at under a streetlight after coming from a church bazaar or something like that. And lo and behold, he shows up, and Colonel Barclay has a cerebral hemorrhage, basically, and passes out and hits his head on the fireplace grate and is killed. And Holmes says, well, you killed. He said, you're guilty. And Wood said, no. And Holmes said, well, who killed him then? And Barclay said, it was a just providence that killed him. But mind you this, that if I had knocked his brains out, as it was in my heart to do, he would have had no more than his due from my hands. If his own guilty conscience had not struck him down, it's likely enough that I might have had his blood upon my soul.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Wood's revenge, is thwarted by fate. And but Barclay, is really even a darker character than that, because it's, he betrayed somebody in love and lied to his the woman who became his wife. So he betrayed her, he betrayed Barclay, and he betrayed his service too, because he gave Wood over to the enemy. So he's a betrayer in love and war, and
that's a good point.
A real black, a dark character there.
Yeah,
deserved it all.
Here. And as Corporal Henry Wood in the BSI, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
But remember, too, that Nancy had shouted David at Colonel Barclay, and his given name was James. So that was the big mystery, is that, who is this David fellow? And Holmes later worked it out from the story of Uriah the Hittite being sent into battle by David, who lusted after Bathsheba, who was Uriah's wife, and betrayed his countrymen there.
And he said his biblical knowledge was rusty. Yeah, that's a very good example. Well, and then we've got, the Norwood Builder. That's another revenge story. It's all romantic rejection. So you've got Jonas Oldacre. And, what we find out had happened here is that John McFarlane, who is the John Hector McFarlane, who's the very unhappy potential victim of this conspiracy, his mother had broken off her engagement to Oldacre because he did cruel things. And so Oldacre waits years to exact this revenge, and he fakes his own murder and tries to frame the woman's son, McFarlane, for the crime, and he wants to break the mother's heart by having her son hanged. And but Sherlock Holmes exposes it all. So that's a really cold-blooded kind of revenge. I mean, this isn't like somebody who seeks justice for a crime. I mean, this is pretty petty in the scheme of things. But it shows you, how a grudge can turn somebody into a real villain over the years.
And, as I'm thinking about the Norwood Builder, the last words that Jonas Oldacre has for Holmes are, "I'll see you hanged for this." And Holmes said, "That privilege will surely be mine." And it's not clear whether he did receive the noose at the end. Although it is likely that he did, since there was that, Holmes says a couple of rabbits accounted for the burned bones in the fire. There's no indication that that's the case, but we'll see. It's for a jury to decide, said Lestrade. Now, but clearly this was something that he plotted well in advance and did his best to get an innocent man hanged, as Holmes said. Well, that's a good one. Oh, another one. And I need to figure out whether this is, again, from my canonical knowledge or from my Granada knowledge. But in the opening of Thor Bridge, Adventure of Thor Bridge, we have Neil Gibson, who is said to be an American senator from one of the western states, I believe. And the Gold King. He showed up and was expressing a desire for Holmes to take on his case. And when Holmes questioned him about some of the details, it was very clear that Gibson did not want to give more information away. And he, he got more and more angry. Holmes said, "What were the exact relations between you and Miss Dunbar?" The Gold King gave a violent start and half rose from his chair and gave a very vague answer. And Holmes dismissed him. He says, "I'm a rather busy man, Mr. Gibson. I have no time or taste for aimless conversations. I wish you good morning." I said, "What the devil do you mean by this, Mr. Holmes? Do you dismiss my case?" "Well, Mr. Gibson, I at least dismiss you." And eventually Gibson took it to say that you mean I lie? "Well, I was trying to express it as delicately as I could, but if you insist upon the word, I will not contradict you." And at that point, he storms out and he says, "I can't make you touch the case against your will. You've done yourself no good this morning, Mr. Holmes, for I have broken stronger men than you. No man ever crossed me and was the better for it." And Holmes says, "So many have said so, yet here I am." So that threat that, Holmes would take this case or be sorry, essentially. He was more of a blusterer than someone who was actually seeking revenge, but he did a pretty good job with his threat.
He's an American. They're all like that.
A blustering American.
Bunch of bozos.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for us. Apologies, overseas people.
Well, and then you've got interesting one in Professor Moriarty. And you could say, in the final problem particularly, we talked a little bit about motives. Well, Moriarty's motive is ruin. He's facing professional ruin, and he's also got this intellectual tussle here with Sherlock Holmes, and Holmes has dismantled Moriarty's criminal organization. He's ruining the professor's life. He's threatening his liberty. Moriarty tells us all of this, third hand through Sherlock Holmes. He comes to Baker Street and warns Holmes to back off. And Holmes doesn't, and so, Moriarty winds up chasing him across Europe and confronting him at the Reichenbach. And that is really, it's almost like a tit-for-tat revenge, You're going to try to destroy me, I'm going to try to destroy you. So there you go.
How'd that work out?
Oops. Yeah.
But interestingly, following on the heels of that, 3 years later when Holmes shows back up in London, who is on his tail but Colonel Moran. And it turns out that Colonel Moran had been the one hurling boulders down the hill at Holmes at Reichenbach. He would have been one of the ones who witnessed what happened between Holmes and Moriarty. And now that Holmes was back in the limelight, Moran was trying to avenge Professor Moriarty's death by taking Holmes out.
Yeah. Well, and then we've got, another really sort of successful example of revenge, and that's really the illustrious client and Kitty Winter. So you've got the awful Baron Adalbert Gruner, who is a real predator, who had ruined people's lives and reputations, and particularly Kitty Winter's life. And, so while Holmes is engaged here in trying to acquire all of this incriminating information that Baron Gruner has, she rushes out of nowhere and throws acid in his face. And that is real poetic justice, because Gruner prides himself on his great appearance and how handsome and attractive he is. And so she really destroys the asset that he values the most.
Yeah.
And she might get a more lenient sentence because of the mitigating circumstances.
Yeah.
But
that's probably one of the most dramatic scenes in the canon.
Yeah.
Just really stands out. And, let's not forget, too, that earlier in that story, as Holmes made his approach head-on with Baron Gruner, Baron Gruner was very clearly threatening Holmes. He asked him about Lebrun, the French agent, and Holmes said, "Oh yeah, I heard he was beaten by some Apaches in the Montmartre district and crippled for life." He said, "Quite true, Mr. Holmes. By a curious coincidence, he had been inquiring into my affairs only a week before. Don't do it, Mr. Holmes. It is not a lucky thing to do. Several have found that out." So again, a very genteel kind of threat, not as blustering as Neil Gibson, but very clearly telling Holmes that he would have his revenge if Holmes kept at it. So between, Gruner threatening revenge on one hand and Kitty Winter exacting revenge on another, it's a wonderful bookend of what we see with regard to vengeance. Oh, here's another one. This one took years to undergo, and that is this is the whole plot that we later find out behind the resident patient.
Oh, right.
Mr. Blessington is not, in fact, Blessington. He is part of the Worthington bank gang, who had tried to rob the Worthington Bank and ended up killing the guard in the process. And Blessington, who was known before as, what was his? Blessington is his alias, but or Worthington, not Worthington. Blessington was Sutton. So Sutton gave state's evidence against the rest of the crew, and one of them was hanged. And then Cartwright was hanged. The other three got 15 years apiece. So their sentences were up, and they came back to avenge the death of Cartwright and to pay back Sutton for his treachery in giving away the gang, for being a rat.
Yeah. What a shabby collection of unhappy people.
I know, right? Oh, and of course, here's one we get to see play out on the screen, as it were, in front of us. Charles Augustus Milverton.
This Milverton.
Boy, if there is a guy who didn't ask for it, I don't know who did. Master blackmailer. One of the most vile people. That gave Holmes the creepy crawlies, like watching the reptiles, the snakes in the reptile exhibit at the zoo. That's
Right.
how Milverton struck him. That's the kind of creepy crawlies he gave Holmes. And of course, as Holmes and Watson were in Milverton's study ready to burgle his safe, they hid behind a curtain, and that midnight visitor showed up and emptied 6 chambers of a revolver into Milverton. Take that, and that, and that, and that, and that. And so we saw revenge played out right in front of our eyes. And again, this was one of those things that, as far as Holmes was concerned, it seemed entirely justified, and he was not about to get in the way of public justice playing itself out.
Yeah, that's a great one. Well, and then I suppose the last one, we could look at is Valley of Fear. And, there it could be another case where Moriarty, because it turns out Moriarty is behind in some way all of these nefarious events. But what happens there is there's this Pennsylvania Criminal Brotherhood, this gang. And Bertie Edwards is a Pinkerton agent who infiltrates and destroys the Scourers. And Ted Baldwin and the surviving members of the Scourers are hunting Bertie Edwards. And he's eventually tracked to England. And he tries to kill Bertie Edwards, or John Douglas, but is killed himself in the struggle. He's shot with his own gun. And so there's, Baldwin, who's after Bertie Edwards or John Douglas, is clearly looking for revenge. But it could also be that Moriarty enacts some revenge on John Douglas, because we find out at the end of that he may have mysteriously disappeared too. So,
Interesting. Well, listeners, what have we missed? What cases of revenge particularly stick out to you in the Sherlock Holmes stories? Drop us a note and let us know. It could be in a comment section on Patreon or on Substack, or just send us an email at trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. And also, we should remind you that quiz challenge that we have in the previous episode, The Case of J, is still open. And we will keep that open until the end of the end of February, to give you a chance to try your hand at that. And we'll announce it in our March show on episode 479. That's the next Morley Montgomery award-winning episode. So try your hand at that.
and that is a pretty attractive trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You take my breath away, Mr. Holmes. And I could not hear the details without being assured that it was my poison which had been used, and that Mortimer Tregennis himself was the murderer. My soul cried out for revenge.